blind date disaster? The CEO sat alone, until a little twin sisters climbed onto his chair and said, the small cafe on the corner was alive with warmth. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, mingling with the gentle clatter of dishes and the murmurs of lovers tucked into booths. Fairy lights glowed along the wooden beams above, casting a golden hue over everything they touched. It was the kind of place where time felt slower, where people laughed softly and leaned in close. In the farthest corner, beneath an antique wall sconce, a man sat alone. Ronald, 32, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, checked his watch for the third time. The minute hand pointed past the hour, 20 minutes late. He said nothing, his expression unreadable, posture straight. His jaw was clean-shaven, his hair perfectly in place. To anyone watching, he looked like a man in control, composed, precise. And yet, he sat at a table for two, untouched coffee in front of him, while the world around him swirled in twos and threes. Couples held hands across steaming cups. Some laughed with abandon. Others whispered sweetly, oblivious to anything else. Ronald noticed all of it without meaning to. He had not wanted to be here. Blind dates were never his thing. But his sister had insisted, practically begged him to try, said he needed more than late nights in the lab and empty takeout boxes. So he agreed, reluctantly. And now, here he was, alone, surrounded by intimacy he could not touch. Then, like a ripple through still water, two small figures darted into view. They were unmistakable, twin girls, no more than 4, dressed in matching red dresses with white trim. Their blonde curls bounced with every step. They moved with a sense of purpose, though no adult followed. Before Ronald could react, one of them climbed into the chair across from him, her knees pressed into the cushion, elbows on the table, eyes locked with his. "Are you sad, mister?" she asked. Ronald blinked. The question was so simple, so direct, it knocked the breath from him. The second girl, standing just beside the chair, tilted her head. "You look like you need a hug." He stared at them, completely disarmed. His voice caught in his throat. He had faced corporate takeovers, media scandals, biotech failures. But this moment, he was defenseless. Then, the first girl leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him. It happened in an instant. Her small arms squeezed around his torso, her cheek pressed briefly to his suit. The scent of strawberries and cinnamon drifted from her curls. The world went quiet. Ronald froze. His body, always held in perfect restraint, didn't know how to respond. But something in him, something long buried, shifted. His chest tightened in a way it hadn't in years. There was no pretense, no reason, just a child's hug, freely given. When she pulled back, Ronald looked down at her, still unable to speak. The girls giggled, as if proud of their work. They were so small, yet they had walked straight into a stranger's quiet grief and touched it without fear. For the first time that night, Ronald felt something stir in him that wasn't resignation or loneliness. It was warmth. He watched the girls, curious now. Identical, full of energy, with eyes that seemed to see more than they should. It didn't take long to notice their dresses were slightly wrinkled, shoes scuffed at the toes, but their joy was untouched. Their names, he would later learn, were Ava and Lily, and they belonged to a young single mother who worked behind the counter of this very cafe. But in this moment, all Ronald knew was that his table was no longer empty. And for the first time in years, neither was he. From behind the cafe counter, Claire's heart skipped a beat. She had just set down 2 steaming mugs when she caught sight of 2 little red blurs darting across the room. Her breath caught. Ava and Lily. Again. She wiped her hands on her apron and hurried across the floor, weaving between tables, her ponytail bouncing lightly behind her. She looked tired. There were faint circles under her eyes, and the slow heaviness in her steps betrayed long hours, but there was a gentleness to her that softened everything. a kind of warmth that lingered even when she moved quickly. As she approached the corner table, she caught the sight of the girls giggling, one sitting squarely on a stranger's chair, the other standing beside him. Claire's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry," she said quickly, her voice a little breathless but kind. She gently placed a hand on each child's shoulder. "They are not supposed to leave the kitchen area." Ronald looked up, blinking, as if pulled from some faraway place. He didn't seem angry, just surprised. And oddly, not in a hurry to have them taken away. Claire bowed her head slightly, avoiding his eyes. "They can be a handful sometimes. Please forgive them." She reached to guide the girls away, but in that brief second, her eyes finally met his. She froze. It was subtle, a flicker, but unmistakable. Her gaze lingered for just a second longer than it should have. The lines around her mouth tightened ever so slightly. Her breath caught. It was as if something had clicked inside her. Recognition? A memory? Then she looked away, masked it quickly. Ronald noticed. He tilted his head slightly, curiosity flickering behind his eyes. It was quick, but it stayed with him. Claire gently took the girls' hands, turning them away. "Come on, girls. Let's leave the nice man alone." The twins didn't resist, but as they walked back toward the kitchen, one of them glanced back over her shoulder. With a grin, she whispered, just loud enough for her mother and Ronald to hear, "He's not sad anymore, Mommy." Claire paused, her eyes shifted briefly, just for a breath, back toward Ronald. But she said nothing. The girls disappeared into the kitchen, and Claire followed, her expression unreadable. Left at the table, Ronald leaned back slowly in his seat. For the first time that evening, his brow furrowed, not from discomfort, but from a strange, growing curiosity. He had come expecting an awkward blind date. Instead, he was leaving with a feeling he hadn't expected at all. Interest, not in a romance, not yet, but in a woman with tired eyes and a gaze that had hesitated, and two little girls who somehow saw straight into his heart. The sky was fading into a soft orange when Ronald returned to the cafe. He did not know why he came. It was late afternoon. After a long board meeting he barely remembered. Instead of heading home, or to the gym, or back to his office, he had found his feet leading him here. To the same cafe, the same quiet corner table by the window. He did not make a reservation. He did not ask for service. He just sat. There was no laptop in front of him, no phone in his hand, only a half-finished glass of water and a man who looked like he was waiting for something he could not name. Outside, passers-by rushed through the evening chill. Inside, the cafe glowed with warmth. Laughter floated around him, the clinking of cups and spoons providing a familiar rhythm. Then came the sudden burst of energy. "Mr. Coffee's here," a tiny voice shouted. Ronald looked up, startled. Two little blurs in red came charging out from behind the counter. Ava and Lily, still in matching red dresses, this time bundled in small coats with floppy bunny ears, ran straight to his table. They stopped right at the edge of the booth, grinning like they had found treasure. "You came back," Ava exclaimed. "We told Mommy you would," Lily added. The nearby tables chuckled. Ronald's lips curved slightly. It was not quite a smile, but it was more than the silence he usually wore. He looked toward the counter, and there she was, Claire. She had just stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw him. For a second, she froze. Then she quickly looked away, turning her body back toward the kitchen as if to hide the blush rising in her cheeks. Ronald turned his attention back to the girls. "Back to being troublemakers?" he asked gently. The girls giggled. One of them tried climbing onto the booth again, but this time Claire's voice called softly, "Girls, let Mr. Coffee have his piece." Claire walked over slowly, tying her apron tighter around her waist. "I hope they're not bothering you," she said, standing beside the table. "They've been talking about the man in the corner for days." "They are fine," Ronald replied, His voice was calm, almost soft. Actually, the last time I was here was the first time I've ever been hugged by a child. Claire's expression faltered. Just for a second. A flicker of something, surprise, maybe sadness, crossed her face. But she didn't ask more. She simply nodded, her tone even. Well, they pick their moments. She stepped away, back to work, keeping her distance. Ronald watched her go, a strange tightness blooming in his chest. Then the door opened. A man, older, thin, clearly homeless, shuffled inside. His coat was torn, shoes uneven, and he clutched a tattered knit cap in his hands. His breath came in small white clouds. The atmosphere shifted. A few customers looked up with unease. One barista hesitated behind the counter. But Claire moved instantly. She raised a hand gently to her staff, signaling calm. Then she walked over to the man. "Cold out today, huh?" she said, voice low and kind. "Let me get you something warm." She guided him to a corner bench by the window, the farthest from anyone's line of sight. Ronald watched as she placed a folded blanket over his shoulders. Then she disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a steaming mug of cocoa and a small paper bag of fresh pastries. She did not ask for money. She did not check if anyone saw. Her eyes were focused only on him, on the way his hands shook as he reached for the cup. Ronald sat completely still, watching. Something deep in him shifted again. When Claire passed by his table later, he stopped her. His voice was lower than before. "Not many people are kind like that," he said, "especially when no one's watching." She smiled softly, almost shy. "I do not think it's kindness," she said. "I just think if I were cold and hungry, I would hope someone would do the same." Ronald said nothing more. When he left, he placed a large bill under the edge of his saucer. Alongside it, he slid a folded note across the table. Claire found it minutes later. She opened the paper with cautious hands. "Thank you for sharing two little angels with me. And thank you for reminding me what real kindness looks like, without lights, without applause." She stood frozen. She wanted to return the money. It was far too much. But before she could move, two small arms wrapped around her legs. "Mommy," Ava whispered. "He's nice." "Like you," Lily chimed. Claire looked out the window. Ronald was already gone. A soft wind blew through the open door as a new customer entered. Claire's hair fluttered gently. And for a moment, her expression turned distant. There was something in her eyes. A memory, maybe. Or something she had almost forgotten how to feel. The evening rush had just begun when Claire's shift reached its peak. The cafe buzzed with noise, coffee grinders whirring, orders being called out, spoons clinking against porcelain. She moved quickly, but with grace, balancing trays, exchanging smiles, wiping tables, never missing a beat. That was when it happened. At a corner table near the back, a man in his 40s, dressed in business attire loosened from a long day, waved Claire over. She approached with her usual politeness, pen in hand. "Can I take your order, sir?" she asked, her voice warm but professional. The man smirked. "How about your number instead?" Claire froze for a second. She gave a small, practiced smile, the one she reserved for situations like this. "I'm happy to help with the menu, sir, but I'll need to get to the next table soon." He leaned in. "Don't be like that. I come here often. You could do better than slinging coffee all day." Several nearby guests turned their heads, sensing the tension. Claire's posture remained calm, but her grip on the notepad tightened slightly. "I'm here to work," she said firmly, her voice quieter now. "Please keep things respectful." Just as the man opened his mouth to push further, the cafe door chimed. Ronald stepped in. He had not meant to come. He had only been passing by, walking home after another long day. But through the wide front window, he had seen Claire. And something about her expression, tense, cornered, had made his steps change direction. He crossed the floor without hesitation, stopping right beside the table. "Is there a problem here?" he asked calmly. The man scoffed. "We're just talking." Ronald didn't even look at him. His gaze rested only on Claire, steady and quiet. "She's working," he said. "Hard. Maybe try being polite." The tone was even, almost gentle, but the authority beneath it was unmistakable. Every nearby conversation went silent. Claire blinked. For a moment, her composure cracked. Not from fear, but from something far more unexpected: gratitude. She said nothing, only met Ronald's eyes with a look that held for several seconds. The man mumbled something and turned away. Ronald gave a small nod, then stepped aside, not waiting for thanks. Claire watched him go, her heart beat louder than the noise around her. The next morning, the cafe opened under a quiet gray sky. Claire had just finished prepping the counter when one of the morning baristas handed her a small envelope. "It was left for you," she said, "from the guy in the suit." Claire opened it, her fingers suddenly uncertain. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery. The handwriting was clean, deliberate. "If it's not too much trouble, I'd like to invite you and your girls to dinner. Nothing formal, not a date. Just a thank you. For the cocoa, the kindness, and for reminding me how to feel human again. No name, just an address to a quiet pizza place across town, and a date, Saturday evening." Claire stood behind the counter, staring at the note. Her eyes lingered on the words, "You and your girls." He had noticed. He had remembered. And he had asked all of them, not just her. She folded the note slowly, her breath catching in her throat. It was not a grand gesture. There were no flowers, no pressure, no expectation. Just an invitation. A moment of care. And somehow, that meant more than anything else. The scent of warm dough and melted cheese hung in the air as Ronald held the door open to the small, family-owned pizza place tucked at the corner of a quiet street. The lighting was soft, booths lined with red vinyl, and children's drawings taped proudly near the counter. Claire stepped inside with Ava and Lily on either side of her, each holding one of her hands. They wore simple dresses beneath their tiny jackets, cheeks flushed from the evening breeze. Ronald gave a soft nod as they approached, and for the first time, Claire smiled without reservation. They chose a booth near the window. The moment the girls slid into their seats, they began chattering over the menu, though both quickly decided they only wanted pizza with extra cheese and apple juice. Ronald watched them, amused, as they talked with that breathless energy only children could maintain. They asked him questions between bites, interrupting each other, giggling freely. "Do you have a dog? Do you eat pizza every day? Do you have a big house?" He answered patiently. "No dog. Not every day. And yes, a big house, but a quiet one." Claire sat quietly at first, but as the girls carried the conversation, she began to relax. Her eyes softened as she watched them include Ronald so naturally, as if he had always been part of their little circle. Ronald, in turn, felt something unfamiliar rise within him. Joy. Laughter. He realized, somewhere between their third round of napkin jokes and Lily accidentally calling pepperoni paper rainy, that he was smiling more than he had in years. And not out of politeness, out of something real. The food came, and with it, a lull in the chatter. Claire picked up her slice slowly, then placed it back down. "I was studying to be a doctor," she said suddenly. Her voice was calm, but there was something distant behind it. Ronald looked at her. "Really?" he asked, genuinely surprised. She nodded. "I was in my third year. Pediatrics. I was always drawn to kids. Their honesty, their resilience." She paused. "Then I got pregnant. My husband." She stopped herself for a breath. "He passed away before the twins were born. I dropped out, moved back here. I didn't want charity or pity. I just wanted to raise them with dignity." Ronald didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, long enough for her to feel seen, not judged. "You've done a beautiful job," he said softly. Claire's fingers tightened around her glass, and for a moment, she looked away. Then came the moment. Ava, licking the last of the cheese off her fingers, leaned across the table. Her eyes sparkled. "Mr. Ronald?" "Yes," he answered, mid-sip of water. She tilted her head. "Do you want to be our daddy?" The table went silent. Claire gasped quietly, her eyes snapping to her daughter, Ava. But Ronald didn't laugh. He didn't deflect. He sat perfectly still, the question hanging in the space between them like a fragile thread. His throat tightened. Words failed him. Claire, stunned, reached for her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, that's not something we just ask." But Ronald gently raised a hand to stop her. "It's okay," he said, voice rougher now, gentler. He looked at Ava and Lily, then at Claire. And for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he wanted to belong. The next morning, Ronald sat in his office, but his mind was elsewhere. After the dinner at the pizza place, he had not stopped thinking about Claire, about her strength, her humility, and about the quiet sadness behind her smiles. Curious, and perhaps needing to understand more, he asked his assistant to look into her past. Just a light search, nothing invasive. What came back surprised him. Claire Bennett, former medical student, top of her class. She had authored a research paper on pediatric neurodevelopmental disorders, one that had been featured in a national medical journal 7 years ago. She had completed her 3rd year with honors, had been accepted into a prestigious residency at a children's hospital. Then nothing. No graduation, no completed residency, no license. She had vanished from the world of medicine entirely. Ronald sat with the file for a long time, rereading the summary, her name printed in bold beside titles that marked brilliance and sacrifice. Later that day, after a long meeting and a short walk under the fading sky, he found himself once again at the cafe. He did not plan to come, but his feet knew the way. When he stepped inside, Ava and Lily were the first to spot him. "Mr. Ronald," they shouted, bolting from the kitchen. They clung to his legs before he even reached the counter. Claire appeared moments later, wiping her hands on her apron. She paused when she saw him, her posture stiffening slightly. But then her shoulders softened, and she gave a polite nod. "Back again?" she asked gently. "I was in the area," he replied. Claire raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced, but said nothing more. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I think this belongs to you." He handed it to her and stepped back, giving her space. Curious, Claire opened the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. Her breath caught. It was her article, a copy of the research paper she had written, complete with a highlighted passage and a short handwritten note beneath it. "I do not think you ever lost this. You just gave it to someone else who needed it more." Her hands trembled slightly. She looked up at Ronald. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't give up," she whispered. "I chose. When I found out I was pregnant, and then when he died, I had to decide. My career or my girls. I chose them." Ronald said nothing. His eyes met hers with a deep, unwavering calm. "I know," he said, "and I respect you more for it." Claire lowered her gaze, swallowing emotion. Then she looked up again. Slower this time. Her voice was softer. "I knew who you were. The first time I saw you, I recognized your face from a conference poster years ago, but I never imagined someone like you would ever walk into the world I live in." She laughed gently, without bitterness. "My world is small, messy, loud, poor. I never thought someone like you would want to stay." Ronald didn't respond right away. He reached into his pocket once more and pulled out a small, weathered leather bracelet. He placed it in her palm. It was old, but cared for. A tiny heart-shaped charm, engraved with a name. Anna. My sister, he said. She studied medicine too. She passed away before she could finish. She used to say the world needs more healers who feel. He closed her fingers over the bracelet. I think she would have liked you. Claire stood frozen, her eyes filled, but she didn't wipe them. The tears were not for sorrow. They were for being seen, for being remembered, for being enough. The sound of small footsteps broke the moment. Ava and Lily had returned, hugging her waist tightly. Mommy's smiling, Lily whispered. Ava looked up at Ronald. Does that mean you can stay a little longer? Ronald looked at Claire. She didn't speak, but her nod was answer enough. He smiled, a soft warmth spreading across his face. If your mom says yes, he said, kneeling to their height, then I am not going anywhere. The days after their emotional reunion moved slower for Claire. Though her heart had stirred with something real, something warm, she began to withdraw. The fear crept in quietly, like cold air through a cracked window. She started declining Ronald's invitations. A walk in the park? She said the girls had homework. Coffee after her shift? She claimed she had errands to run. She smiled, she thanked him, but she always kept a few steps back. Her words were polite, but her silence spoke louder. Inside, Claire was torn. Every time she saw Ronald, something inside her reached out, and yet, she pulled herself away. Not because she did not feel, it was because she felt too much. He was kind, gentle, present, too present, and it terrified her. In the quiet of her apartment, once the girls had fallen asleep, she would sit by the window and whisper the same thoughts to herself, over and over. He's too good. Men like that don't stay. And I can't let the girls believe in something that might break. Ronald noticed the change. The warmth in her eyes had cooled. Her messages became shorter. She stopped laughing when he made silly faces at Ava and Lily. Her answers were filtered, careful. It confused him, hurt him even. But he didn't push. Instead, he chose a different way to speak. Each time the girls came to the cafe, he handed them a small, folded envelope. They were too young to read it all, but they'd run straight to Claire with it, grinning like they were delivering treasure. She never wrote back. But he kept writing anyway. One afternoon, while Claire was stacking dishes near the register, Lily tugged at her apron. Mommy, can I read Mr. Ronald's letter today? Claire hesitated, then nodded. Lily opened the note slowly, her little fingers tracing the words. She read aloud, in the best voice she could manage. I don't have a family waiting to tell stories to every night. But since meeting you and your girls, I find myself thinking maybe I want one. Maybe I want a home. A loud, messy, beautiful one, with giggles and spilled juice and someone smiling at the end of the day. Claire stood frozen. That night, after the girls were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table. A shoebox lay in front of her, filled with Ronald's letters. Some unopened. Most read more than once. Her hands trembled as she lifted the latest one. She unfolded it, expecting more of the same calm, kind words. But this one was different. Just one sentence, written in bold, neat strokes. If I could go back to that night, I wouldn't have come because my sister begged me to. Her breath caught. I would have come because I hoped I'd find you. Claire broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Tears slipped down her cheeks, one after the other, quiet and unstoppable. The kind of tears that come not from pain, but from relief. From the slow, cracking release of a fear she had carried too long. And for the first time in years, she let them fall. The office was just beginning to stir when Ronald stepped out of the elevator, coffee in hand, briefcase tucked neatly at his side. His assistant looked up from her desk, blinking like she had just seen a ghost. Sir, you have visitors. Ronald raised an eyebrow. I do? She nodded, smiling slowly. 3 of them, waiting in the lobby, all wearing red. Ronald blinked. He stepped through the glass doors and into the main hall, and froze. There, standing confidently in the middle of the marble floor, were two small girls in matching red dresses, Ava and Lily, their golden curls bouncing as they spotted him. Each held something in their tiny hands. A box wrapped with string, homemade and slightly smushed, but unmistakably filled with baked goods. As soon as they saw him, their faces lit up. "Mr. Ronald," Ava shouted. "We came to find you," Lily added. They ran toward him at full speed and launched themselves into his legs. He dropped to one knee just as they reached him, arms opening instinctively. Then Ava whispered, just loud enough for the whole floor to hear, "We came to pick up our daddy." A hush fell over the office. Staff paused mid-email, heads turning from desks, conversations dying mid-sentence. Ronald's breath hitched. He looked up, wide-eyed, still crouched with both girls in his arms. And there she was, Claire. She stood a few steps behind, in a simple white dress, her long blonde hair down for the first time he'd seen. There was a quiet bravery in her eyes, a soft trembling at the corners of her smile. "I didn't want to wait anymore," she said, voice steady but full. "If your invitation still stands." Ronald stood slowly, the girls holding tightly to his hands. His voice was low, but it carried. "I used to think I wasn't made for love, that maybe I didn't know how to do it right." He looked at her, eyes shining. "But I was just waiting for the person who would teach me." Claire's breath hitched. She stepped closer. He reached for her hand. Later that week, the sun painted the park in shades of honey and gold. Ronald walked barefoot through the grass, Ava riding on his shoulders, Lily hanging onto his arm. Claire trailed behind, filming the scene on her phone, laughter echoing softly across the green field. The picnic blanket was messy with crumbs, juice boxes half empty, laughter constant. Claire's voice drifted in a quiet voiceover, gentle as the breeze. "I used to think love was something other people found, something I lost when life became survival. But maybe the ones who hurt the most love the deepest." She paused, then smiled. "And maybe we were never too broken, just waiting to be seen." That night, under string lights in the backyard, the smell of cinnamon and toasted marshmallows lingered in the air. Ronald sat between the girls at an old wooden table. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes half closed with peace. Ava reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Lily yawned, her head resting against his arm. Ronald looked around, taking it all in, the laughter, the warmth, the family. And then he smiled, eyes filled with wonder. "Well," he said quietly, "turns out the worst blind date of my life." He glanced at Claire. "Was the best thing that ever happened to me." If this story touched your heart, we invite you to stay a little longer in our world of warmth and healing. At Kindness and Love Tales, we share true to the heart stories of love, resilience, and second chances. Because kindness is the most powerful kind of love. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a tale that could change your day. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected places. Subscribe now to Kindness and Love Tales for more stories that stay with you forever.